Welcome back, everyone. So I'm getting a lot of people asking about the Honda ADV160 and what my thoughts are and how it's going and all that. And I thought I would kind of do a follow-up for my last review. Should probably turn the key on. I haven't really ridden this thing much. It's got 1,200 miles on it, maybe, if that. Just over a year. 1150. 1150. That's what I got. So far, it's actually held up pretty well. Not that I would expect anything less than that. I mean, it is a Honda. It is built by Honda in a Honda factory. I would expect nothing but perfection. I have, however, had one issue with this bike, and it was the water pump has been leaking, or I got to be more careful with that. It's seeping, not leaking. There's no drips or anything. There's no evidence of coolant loss, but it has had evidence of coolant seepage in the, or from the, what's called the weep hole of the water pump. I did have the dealer replace the pump under warranty twice, and it's no different from the other two. So from what I've been reading, this is something that is just going to happen. And it's not just a Honda thing. It's not just a Honda scooter thing. It's motorcycle water pumps are just built differently than automotive pumps. And apparently they do, or they can leak when they're new. Sometimes they never stop. Sometimes they do. It's kind of a shoulder shrug kind of situation. But like I said, there's no evidence of coolant loss. It's just a little bit of a seepage. You can see the green staining underneath if you look up at the weep hole. Other than that, there is a recall on these for the oil pump driven gear due to a faulty. So they're replacing, as I understand it, both the driven gear and the drive gear as part of the recall. And what happened was when they had finished when they had shot. They use a shot blasting, or kind of like sandblasting, of the finished gear as it comes out of the metal gear. Of the metal gear that comes out of the foundry as they're producing that gear. They shot blast it. Allegedly, they went a little too rough on the finish, and it is wearing out the driven gear, the pump, the gear on the pump itself. It's made of plastic. So what can happen is over time, over a couple thousand miles, I assume, you could potentially lose all oil pressure, just like in the blink of an eye. So Honda has recalled these bikes for that one thing, and I haven't scheduled the repair yet. My plan is to do it at the end of the season and get some riding use out of this bike in the peak motorcycle riding season. So I'm not going to run out and just get it done. Otherwise, I have no complaints. The short answer of whether I'd buy this again or not is no, solidly. I will never buy another. I would not buy this. If I knew then what I know now about how it handles and what I'm looking for in a riding experience, I would have bought the Suzuki Bergman 200 that was sitting next to it for the same money. Unfortunately, you can't usually test drive motorbikes before you buy them. You buy a car, you can test drive it. With a motorbike, that's not the case. So you really don't know what you're getting into until you sign the papers, which is really unfortunate. Because again, I need to be clear. None of my gripes with this bike have anything to do with quality. They have nothing to do with the bike design itself. Every motorcycle, every scooter, every moped has its own riding characteristics, its own geometry, its own personality. And you don't really get to know the bike until you've ridden it. I can't put it any other way. I'm not a huge fan of this bike's personality. I think style-wise, I think it's sharp. I think Honda did a nice job with this bike. In terms of equipment and usability and versatility, I mean, you've got your little weather-tight storage compartment. You've got a phone charger cable right there. You've got under-seat storage, which is something you don't even get on a motorcycle, which is one of the big appeals for these smaller scooters. You got all that storage underneath. Now, I did add this aftermarket padded liner, which I love. I got this on Amazon, of all places. I'm not usually a big fan of Amazon aftermarket shit, but this is a good thing. It's a nice little pocket there. I love it. I did add a toolkit. These don't even come with toolkits. You have to buy them separately if you want them, using the parts catalog. None of my complaints or gripes have anything to do with, like, oh, it's a piece of junk, or oh, it handles like shit, or no, it's just the geometry that Honda went with on this bike is more geared towards the adventure rider, towards somebody in an urban setting. I tend to take long country rides and, tree-lined streets at 40, 45 miles an hour. Even the power output in this thing is pretty reasonable. Now, I just for the record, I've owned a 98 Honda Helix. I owned that for 3 or 4 years. That's a 250. I had a Silverwing 600 for 1 month. Actually, I rode it for 1 week, and then it was totaled. And I've owned a couple of other smaller bikes, a Honda Elite 150, and I had a little 49cc Chinese scooter 2-stroke. As far as power output and power delivery and throttle response for a scooter, this is pretty damn nice. It is fuel injected, and this does have the new 4-valve engine, the ESP Plus drivetrain, they call it. So 4-valve, twin cam. I think is it twin or is it single cam? Maybe it's probably a single cam with 4 rocker arms. But anyway, it's a nice little bike. And I do enjoy riding it. Don't get me wrong, I do enjoy riding it. But as I said earlier, I wouldn't buy it again. I would buy something with a longer wheelbase, lower seat height, something like a Bergman 200 or a 400. The 200s are discontinued, so I won't be able to get one of those, but possibly a 400. Yamaha's got a few nice options with bigger engines. They've got the X-Max 300. Honda, for whatever reason, has not brought over the ADV300 to the U.S., and I think I know why. Because they're not selling. I mean, Americans aren't buying small bikes. They're buying Harleys. They're buying V-Stars and big, giant, Honda Rebels, and not the Rebel, the Shadows. They're buying bigger bikes here in the States. Smaller bikes don't do very well unless you're in, let's say you're in Chicago or New York or Boston, LA. Maybe they're selling them there, but not so much out in the less densely populated areas. So let's go ahead and take it for a ride and see how she goes. But just to be clear, I mean, I don't have any complaints about really anything other than the driving dynamics, the handling, mainly because of the type of riding that I typically would do, where you're just kind of, cruising at a straight line on a paved road. So my biggest complaint with this bike is there's no place for a cup holder like I've put in other ones. But I just noticed a large Dunkin's Iced fits there. Kind of wonder how that'll work. I say we try it. Let's see how long it lasts. Might as well get that. That kind of worked as a little cup holder. Yeah. Then I dumped coffee all over the damn thing. All right, so now we best wash the bike. Well, that should take care of that. Now let's hope my helmet stayed dry. This is actually kind of good. So I hosed the whole thing down. I washed it properly with soap and water. Did any water get in here? Nope. Did any water get in here? Nope. Dry as a bone. So. And I actually did spray water at high pressure around all these areas, and no water at all got into places where it shouldn't. So that's quite nice. Oh, now I'm gonna get all wet. I have nothing to dry it with, so. Okay, let's get on with it. And just as we're rolling through town, just around this corner here, nope, not yet. There we go. So just as I round this corner, I come across a bicycle versus Mini Cooper crash that the police had just rolled up to. There was a motorcycle and a couple of bystanders, but it looked like a Mini Cooper, which is out of frame. You can't see it. Creamed a bicyclist right there, maybe just 3-4 minutes earlier. The police made it there so fast because the police station was just before that turn. So they were there almost immediately. I didn't read anything in the papers after about it, so nothing happened. So, in other words, no one died. Probably just a broken leg or something. But still, not something you want to roll up on a motorbike, knowing that you just survived a crash just 10 years ago. Crazy. So that was interesting. Just rolled up, drove by a fresh accident scene, bicyclist versus car, and I saw a motorcycle there, but I think he was just rendering aid. But yeah, so about the ADV. So here's the deal. We're averaging about 100 miles per gallon out of this thing, and I mean, that's more than the factory stated it was good for. Take my helmet off so I can hear myself speak. But, I haven't really had any issues with this bike in, well, nearly, 1,200 miles now we're at? 1180. So, yeah, 1,200 miles. I have had, as I mentioned in previous videos, there is a known issue with water pumps in power sports engines. And this one is no exception. The pump has been replaced for seepage, minor seepage, under warranty twice, and it still seeps just a little bit, just a teeny bit, little bit of seepage. Nothing to really worry about, and it's supposed to go away on its own. According to Honda's own warranty rep, that is their official statement on the issue. Once the ceramic seal and the stainless steel bed together, the leakage should basically stop. But it's not by any stretch, it's not dripping coolant anywhere. It's just, you can see a little bit of a minor seepage, and that's that. I'm going to take a look and see where we're at now. But I just washed the bike for the first time since I bought it. I haven't washed it at all. I haven't ridden it much. But looking up there, I don't see anything, do you? So, I think that issue will effectively resolve on its own over time. But reliability-wise, it has been nothing but perfect. And I'm going to focus on a lot of the positives with this model, and with all current Honda, Suzuki, Yamaha scooters. Everything is now fuel injected, even the Metropolitan, which is their cheapest scooter. One of the nice things about fuel injection, I think this comes with the territory, but fuel injection is going to give you more predictable dependability. Now, I love carburetors because I have no problem tinkering with them. I have no issues. I've had carbureted engines my whole life, literally since I was 9 years old. Motorbikes, mini bikes, scooters, mopeds. Carburetors don't scare me. Some people are afraid of them. They don't know how to work on them, so they just go on eBay and buy Chinese carburetors for pennies on the dollar, and okay, it'll work until it doesn't, then you buy another one. Meanwhile, I don't think I've ever replaced a carburetor with a new one, but I have worked on, serviced, and repaired them. But with fuel injection, there is no, how is it going to run today? That question doesn't exist. It's going to start and run the same way every time, whether it's hot out, whether it's cold out, whether the engine's hot, whether the engine's cold. It's going to run the same way every day, day in, day out, until something catastrophic goes wrong. And that catastrophic failure is almost always the fuel pump. So on a carbureted motorcycle or a scooter, depending on where the fuel tank is placed in relationship to the carburetor, carbureted bikes will have a lift pump. It's a very low pressure pump, and it just ticks away whenever the engine is spinning. That fuel pump is just ticking away, and it's sending fuel into the carburetor bowl, where it is then returned back through a return line back into the system. Keeps a constant flow of fresh fuel in the carburetor bowl, and as long as that pump is ticking away, that carburetor is happy. On a high pressure fuel pump system, on a fuel injected system, you have a high pressure fuel pump that brings the fuel to a fairly high pressure, and it delivers it straight into the injector. Those high pressure fuel pumps do have a higher failure rate than the low pressure pumps did on the carbureted bikes. But what you can do as an owner, as a rider, is make sure your fuel tank is at least half full. I fill up when it's half full or less. So that way, that pressure, that fuel pump lives inside the tank, and it requires fuel for two things: for lubrication and for cooling. So the pump statistically should last longer if you keep the fuel at a higher level, but it will eventually fail, just like anything else. That's really the only downfall to fuel injected bikes. The other thing is they're electronically controlled. This thing has more computers in it than my Miata. So, and it has anti-lock brakes. So there's a lot of technology packed into this very compact package. I mean, this thing is no bigger than I am physically. It probably weighs as much as I do. A lot of technology packed into a small space. You've got an engine under the floor. The cylinder head is somewhere right about here. So because of the way everything is packaged on this bike, you have to have a decent cooling system. So in this case, Honda went with a water cooling system with a radiator mounted right on the side of the engine. So that way, rather than adding an additional cooling fan, this particular drivetrain or power unit uses the flywheel as they mounted an impeller on the flywheel that draws air through that way. I think it's brilliant. I have no real issues with Honda's usage of technology and the way everything is packaged. See, when it comes to manufacturing and engineering, it's all about the packaging. How are things placed in a way that maximizes efficiency of space and maximizes the material usage? And there's a whole lot going into just how all of that is done. Basically, the shape of the fuel tank to the layout of the engine, to make it a usable bike that can be sold at a reasonable price. Now remember, this bike isn't made for the US market. It is not. Honda decided, okay, why don't we send a few every year to the US and see how they do? They're still selling them here. But this bike is really primarily designed for the Southeast Asian and European markets. I went to Bermuda last year and I saw a ton of these. Actually, not this model, but I've seen a lot of Honda 125s that use the same drivetrain, but the older version of it, the 125cc version of this drivetrain, which is and the reason for that is Bermuda has a displacement limit on motorcycles. I don't think you can have anything bigger than a 125. So you'll never see a 160 over in Bermuda. Not going to happen. But bottom line, the way this bike is built and packaged, I think it's brilliant. So, in terms of power, though, this does have a lot of low-end torque. The 4-valve engine does give you a lot of low-end torque. I'm very impressed with that. I'd say it pulls every bit as well as a 250, an older 250, like a Honda Helix, or I mean even a Reflex. What would they call the Forza 250? I don't know why there's a car behind me, but I'm trying to be discreet. I don't like filming in public for that reason. But so the low end torque and the pulling off from a stop is impressive for this little bike. And I attributed that to just really well dialed in fuel injection and the 4-valve configuration. The 2-valve version of this engine, which was a 150, I think, as I understand it, it may have had a lot more high-end torque, but I think Honda shifted those torque numbers down a little bit by doing what they did. Increase the displacement and add 2 more valves. So it breathes better at lower speeds. No, I'm sorry, that's not how that works. I think it's the other way around. The old garden hose effect where you put your thumb over the garden hose. I think you want smaller intake for low... Anyway, I'll have to look at the torque curve, and there's numbers on the internet I can look at to see what that really translates to in terms of the torque curve. But anyway, just brought it through a car wash, and none of the secret compartments got wet. How about the fuel door? No, not even in the fuel door. That's impressive. I love this. Honda really thought this out. So there's a little compartment for the fuel cap. Look at that. You don't get that on a Harley. Actually, no, I think a Harley just has a tank cover that opens and you just put the gas in that way. But I mean, there's a lot of little things that they really thought of. They really put some thought into when they designed this bike. Now here's where things go south. So I've got 1,200 miles on this bike, and that's because I never ride it. And I don't really ride it that much because I don't really like it that much. I mean, and let me be clear. It has nothing to do with the bike. I don't think Honda did nothing wrong. I think this bike is meant for a different kind of rider. So a lot of the riding that I do is kind of... when I was out on my Helix or my Silverwing, even my Elite 150... I was primarily just flat out going off into the distance on a country road because we have a lot of nice riding roads here. We have a lot of bikes. You know how many bikes I saw just getting here? So because of that, because of all the beautiful motorcycling roads out here in New England and New Hampshire specifically, I'm more of a cruiser type rider. This isn't meant for me. This is meant for somebody else. I don't know who that person is, but it isn't me. Granted, I appreciate it for what it is, and every time I ride this bike, I do appreciate it a little bit more. I will be honest about that. Every time I take it out, every time I ride it, every time I start it, I appreciate it just a bit more. I would love to see Honda bring back a 300 to 250 cc maxi scooter. I've heard rumors that they may eventually bring the 300, the Honda ADV160, or is it a 360? Whatever it is, 350, whatever the hell it is. I've heard rumors that bike may eventually make it to the U.S., but even still, I don't think I'm a buyer for that because it would be more or less a bigger version of this, and I have my reservations. I would rather see a spiritual successor to the Silverwing before I buy something like this again. And so, yeah, for that and that alone, I wouldn't buy this again. I had regrets buying it very shortly after I purchased it. Not buyer's remorse because of what I spent. It was more or less, is this the right bike for me? And unfortunately, with motorcycles, unlike buying a car, you don't get a chance to test drive it. There's no opportunity for you to, I want to test drive one of those. Okay, here are the keys. No, it doesn't work that way. The only time you ever get a test drive on a motorcycle is if the manufacturer sponsors an event. And there are some dealers that actually have done this. I believe the last one I saw was I think it was a Kawasaki or a Yamaha test drive event. But I didn't sign up for it. I had no interest in a Yamaha at the time. And it was mostly their full-size bikes, you know. About half a tank of gas, 261.93, just under a gallon, and some of it ended up on the ground. So what happens if you overfill it, there's a little hole down there, it routes the excess down to the ground. So it's got that feature. I just reset this, but it was 89.9 miles, nearly 100 miles per gallon average. So I just reset. And I thought I was recording, but I wasn't. Oh well. So yeah, that went pretty well. But I don't know if I got it on camera, but I do believe I got a bicycle accident. Mini Cooper versus bicycle, it looked like. It looked like he had sailed across the intersection the wrong way and smacked the bike, which is tragic either way, no matter how you look at it. But I didn't get hit this time, so that's good. I'll take that. Anyway, let's take a look at that water pump while we're here. So I just filled it up. Took less than a gallon but we're a little over half a tank. And so we're burning about 100 miles per gallon on this bike. The gas mileage appeared to have leveled off so far. I noticed a drastic improvement in the first, between like 500 and 1,000 miles. A noticeable improvement. Now, do we have anything leaking out of that pump? That's the question. I don't see any residue at all. Nothing. It's clean as a whistle. So maybe there is something to that. Maybe that pump seal really does have to work its way in, and a new pump isn't going to fix it. That may be the case. You see how it's set up for passenger action. I will not be using that feature. Not even a little bit. Not even once. But this bike is, it's the funniest thing. It's like the more I ride it, the more I begin to appreciate what it is. So, I mean, I can't say that I don't like the bike. I do. I mean, I do in some ways. It's not my Helix and it's not my Silverwing. But I will say this. It is definitely an improvement in almost every way. When compared to the 1980s Honda lineup, with the exception of the Helix. And I can say that because I've owned at least one of those bikes. So when I say it's an improvement over the 1980s Honda products, now, I'm not talking longevity and I'm not talking reliability. The 1980s Honda products, for example, for the U.S. market anyway. I can't speak for the other markets, but in the U.S. we got a pretty nice lineup. So in the 1980s, the U.S. market got the Honda Spree, which was a 49cc with a fixed-speed transmission. It did not have a variator or CVT, just a clutch, nothing more. Top speed of about 20, maybe 25 miles an hour. We had the Honda Elite 50, which was a rebadged Honda Dio. Now that thing was basically a Honda Spree with a variator, so it could do about, and it didn't have the speed restriction. So the Spree was the bike that was built specifically around the moped laws. So if your bike is classified as a moped, that means it can do no more than 25 miles per hour, generally has a fixed speed transmission, or some of them even have 2-speed. But they can't do more than 25 miles an hour. They are restricted. And you don't need a license to drive one. Well, you do need a moped license if you don't have a driver's license. But a moped license is easy to get and very inexpensive. They don't require insurance, and they don't necessarily fall under all the same laws as a motorcycle. They're kind of like between a bicycle and a scooter. Okay, proper scooter, yeah. So where was I? So you had the Elite 50. You had the Honda Elite 80, the 125, and the 150. Then you had the Elite 250. Now those bikes are the ones I'm referring to. Those are the scooters that can actually go the distance. They were water-cooled, 4-stroke. The 125, I think, topped out at around 50 miles an hour, maybe 55. The 150 would get you approximately 60-ish and a tailwind. The 250 could do highway easily. And you could do about 70 to 75 miles an hour on a 250. Okay, those are good bikes. They were great. They were solidly built. They were reliable, and they were inexpensive to keep running. And you also had the Honda Helix 250, which used the same driveline as the Elite 250, but that was built more for touring. Now, the Helix 250 is one of the best scooters ever made, period. And I'm including Vespa in this. The Helix 250 has a cult following for a good reason. And I owned one, I can tell you, and I was part of that cult following for many years. And I loved that Helix. It was like nothing else. It was its own thing. When I say this is better than the 1980s Hondas, I'm specifically referring to the build quality, the suspension, and the driveline, the feel, the fit, and finish of the bike. It is more solidly built. The suspension is more advanced. Those older Hondas, they used leading link suspension, which was it was an anti-dive technology. So when you pulled on the brake, the wheel would the front end would actually stay relatively level because the braking force would counteract the downward motion of the front fork. There was nothing inherently wrong with those, but it was imprecise. They weren't. How can I put this? Because I've had the Helix and the Elite 150 completely torn apart to the bare frame. I know how they're put together. They just weren't. Quality wasn't what it is now. Because now they're using a little bit more advanced machining, a little bit more complicated designs. But the benefit of that is better overall ride quality. For example, when you hit a bump on this thing, it feels much better than it would have if you were on a Helix or an Elite 150 or 125. I forgot one model. So the Elite 80, that was the one that Honda sold the most of. In fact, the Elite 80 was in production longer than the Helix, if I'm not mistaken, because it was in continuous production from 1985 until about 2006. Nevertheless, the Elite 80 was a 4-cycle, air-cooled little runabout. Could do about 45 miles an hour, and they were slow as shit. But back to the comparing a modern Honda to an older Honda, these are faster. They take off a little bit faster. They have better braking. A lot of those earlier Hondas didn't have disc brakes anywhere, not front, not rear. They were drum all around. And they also had smaller wheels. So I think this has a 13-inch front rim, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe 13, maybe bigger than that. I think the rear tire is, what is this thing here? It's a 13-inch rear, so that's got to be a 14-inch front rim. Now, that's a huge improvement over two 10-inch tires, which is what Honda used to use. For example, I know because I had one, the Elite 150 used two 10-inch tires. And, you know, that definitely has a huge effect on ride quality. This one's got a 13-inch in the rear and a 14 in the front. So that's pretty good. That is an improvement, and that does improve ride quality, especially on rough roads. The other thing I want to point out is on those earlier water-cooled Hondas, they had a radiator in the front, whereas now it's mounted to the side of the engine. And I feel that gives you, it reduces weight for one. It eliminates an electric fan. That's two. And it eliminates the possibility of leaks between here and the front. So on those older bikes, they had, I believe there were just aluminum tubes that were used for connecting the coolant lines from the front to the back. And that radiator up in the front just added weight over the front wheel. That wasn't really necessary. It wasn't a lot of weight, but weight is weight. But what I'm really getting at is the fit and finish and the overall build quality of these bikes is better. And I'm going to catch hell for this because here's why. The argument will be, well, there's more to go wrong and they're harder to fix. And I'm not going to disagree with you. These newer bikes, there's more to go wrong and they won't last as long. That's just the evolution of, the mechanics of the bike itself. In the race to increase fuel efficiency and to reduce emissions, a lot of technology has gone into these bikes, and just in the interest of keeping profits up, they have reduced the quality, reduced the amount of material used in the engine blocks. The pistons are lighter and thinner. Everything is lighter, smaller, cheaper, faster. I mean, that's the trade-off. The trade-off is, well, you do get for the first couple of years of ownership, you get a better bike overall, a better ride quality, a better everything. But the trade-off is, over time, it's going to be more problematic. And that's not something I'm going to argue with, because I completely agree with that statement. I just stated it, so I must agree with it, right? But the truth is, I think it's a fine trade-off. I mean, I have owned and worked on those older Hondas, those old carbureted Hondas. They're good bikes. They're good scooters. If you find one in good shape, buy it. Because they're great little bikes. And they are bulletproof. They are absolutely bulletproof. I can tell you right now, and I've said this in many videos, I had a 98 Honda Helix that was, again, it falls into the category of 1980s Honda scooters. And that bike right there, man, I could tell you. That thing, I'm going to close my garage. So that scooter survived. So that scooter survived the oil plug falling out on the highway at 77 miles an hour. All the oil leaked out, got all over everything in the back, completely just soaked everything in oil, left a nice trail on the highway for other drivers to contend with. And before I had realized it, I didn't even realize anything had gone wrong until I started noticing the speed was dropping. And then suddenly I heard a chirp, and that was the engine seizing up, simultaneously releasing the centrifugal clutch. So fortunately, I was able to coast to a safe stop. It was on a Sunday around this time. Actually, it was around this time of day. And for somebody was looking over my shoulder because, like I said, I could have been killed that day when that occurred. But fortunately, I was able to just fill it back up with oil. I put a new oil plug in there, and I filled it right back up. And before you knew it, she was running like a top. I did no repairs. I did none of that. Nothing to the engine. I put another 10,000 miles on that engine, and it still didn't burn oil. So I find that to be quite mind-blowing, that it survived all of that abuse and came back for more. Now, if that happened to this engine, it's done. It's done. Don't pass go. Don't collect $200. It's done. Now, I'm going to show you guys something. Now, I think I've said enough about the scooter. It is a good bike. It's well made. Despite, being a more modern machine, it's going to have its quirks. It's going to have its problems over time. And they're going to be harder to fix. They're going to cost more to fix. That's just the evolution of everything today. I mean, everything made today. That's just how it is. So, my final thought is this. You can tell by riding this bike that it is well engineered. It's well built. But the personality of the bike, the way it's designed, the layout, the riding position, the seat, all of those little factors, it's not the right bike for me. It just isn't. But it is a good little bike. And every time I ride it, I feel a little bit happier that I have it. But it doesn't beckon me to ride it for hours and hours at a time. The Helix, on the other hand, I would just ride it for the sake of riding it. I just don't feel that way about this one. But when I'm on it and I'm on the road and the wind's in my face, I'm enjoying every minute of it. Do I anticipate any issues down the road? Absolutely. The fuel pump will be the first thing to die. That's from what I'm reading. The fuel pumps on these are known to go, and it's out of warranty at this point. I'm not worried about it. I've done I can replace a fuel pump. They're not that hard to get to. I looked it over, and I have the manual, and it's a $50 part. I mean, I'm not going to cry over a $50 fuel pump. I might cry over the amount of work it's going to take to get it out, but, I mean, ultimately, it's probably going to fail at some point. But otherwise, very happy with it. Wouldn't buy again, and I still stand by that. The next one I buy will have to be something a little bit longer, a little more powerful. I've got my eye on a used Reflex right now. I just haven't reached out to I know someone who's selling one potentially. Almost no miles on it. Sat in a shed its whole life. So I'm going to potentially reach out to that person and just make them an offer. But I'll have to sell this to do that. I'm not quite ready to sell it. Who knows? I may just keep this and just be done with it and just be happy with what I've got. Haven't decided yet. It's a tough decision. It really is. Let's see if that deoxit fixed my charger. Yeah, I got some water and it's charging. All right, I think we fixed it. Good.